They said the valley was impossible to reach, that the mountains guarded it like angry giants, and that anyone who tried to cross them would disappear into the cold. For years, the people trapped inside had survived on prayers, scraps, and fading hope, waiting for a miracle that would not come. The war had sealed every road, choked every supply line, and turned the surrounding land into an endless field of ashes. Commanders far away called it a red zone, a place too dangerous, too costly, too hopeless to save. But some missions begin long before orders are given, and this one began with a single message smuggled through the dark: "There are thousands here, and we are still alive." When Captain Rourke read those words, he felt something inside him shift. He had seen ruined cities before, had walked streets where silence replaced laughter, but this message was different. It carried weight, not of desperation alone, but of defiance. These people had refused to die. And he refused to let them. The problem was simple. Every rule, every regulation, every protocol screamed at him to forget the valley and move on. The area was surrounded by hostile forces, monitored day and night, guarded by artillery that never slept. The higher command insisted rescue was impossible, but Rourke had stopped believing in the word impossible a long time ago. He gathered his team, 7 soldiers who had followed him through disasters that should have broken them. They met in an abandoned outpost where the roof shook with every gust of wind. No lights, no uniforms, no formal orders, only whispered truth. He told them what he planned, and he expected objections, hesitation, fear. Instead, they nodded, one by one, because sometimes loyalty is not to the rules but to the people who need you most. They studied the valley's old maps, traced routes no one had dared travel, and crafted a plan so reckless that even speaking it out loud felt like walking on thin ice. They would infiltrate enemy lines, disable key outposts, and open a corridor wide enough for civilians to escape. It was a plan that should not work, but it was the only plan they had. The night they began, the mountains were swallowed in fog so dense it felt alive. Every sound echoed twice, once in the air and once inside their ribs. As they moved deeper into enemy territory, the world narrowed to the crunch of gravel under their boots and the cold whisper of the wind against their ears. They reached the first outpost at dawn. Smoke curled from its chimney, and guards patrolled lazily, unaware that history was creeping toward them. Rourke raised his hand, signaling silence. What happened next would be remembered only in fragments. Shadows moving, muffled steps, a single flash of light, and then silence again. The outpost fell before the sun fully climbed the sky. They pushed on, breaking rule after rule, engaging without authorization, using improvised tactics, risking exposure with every step. By the third night, their strength was fading, food ran low, ammunition was precious. And the enemy was beginning to notice ghosts moving through the mountains, but quitting was no longer an option. They were too close. The people in the valley could feel it too, hope returning like warmth after a long winter. When Rourke's team finally reached the valley floor, what they found tightened their throats. Families huddled in makeshift shelters, children too weak to cry, elders staring at the sky as if waiting for permission to breathe again. These people had held on for months, surviving on courage alone. When they saw the soldiers emerge from the mist, they didn't cheer. They simply watched, eyes shining with the quiet disbelief of those who have been abandoned before. Rourke knelt beside an old man who whispered, "You came." Rourke replied, "We're getting you out." The escape was the longest night of their lives, moving thousands of civilians through a mountain pass while artillery thundered around them felt like guiding shadows through fire. Every explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. Every second, Rourke feared the sky would open and swallow them. His team split into pairs, carrying children, supporting the injured, urging the terrified to keep moving. They shielded civilians with their own bodies when the shelling grew close. They fought off patrols that stumbled upon the caravan. They marched until their legs went numb from the cold. And then, just before the first light broke over the horizon, they reached the ridge. Below lay the safe zone, the border they were never supposed to cross, the line they were ordered to avoid. Behind them the valley burned. Ahead, thousands waited for a chance to live another day. For the first time since the mission began, Rourke allowed himself to exhale. They had broken every rule, but they had saved every life they could. When command finally learned what had happened, reports flooded in disbelief, anger, shock. But when they saw the faces of the rescued, when they heard the stories of those who would have died in silence, the anger softened. Rules exist for order, but sometimes humanity writes its own rules. Rourke and his team were never officially praised, never formally thanked, never awarded medals. But in the valley that no longer existed, thousands of people whispered their names into the wind. And some missions, no matter how dangerous, live forever in the hearts of those who survived, because a handful of soldiers refused to walk away.